I see the YouTube thing, so I think it's working.
I'm looking at a loading indicator. All right, I think should be live on YouTube. This is the October 26, 2021 meeting of the Node.js Loaders team. We have Jacob and Bradley. I'm going to pull up the notes document and drop this YouTube link in there before I forget it. Yeah, Bradley or Jacob, how are we doing? Where do we stand?
I think we're sitting pretty good on the design documents. They've been updated with all the various things except for an example that involves short circuiting, which I will probably add after tonight's meeting, just because I haven't had time to do that yet. And then also watching bugs for ESM related things since last week's release. I saw one came in. So fortunately, that's about it. Shall I pull up the
Sure.
The design?
Yeah, I went through them again last night. I wonder if we should just merge in like what we have, or maybe we should respond to the latest like set of notes and then just merge in like what we have, and then we can keep keep iterating on it in PRs or something, because there's nothing objectionable about any of these documents, I think, at this point.
Okay, cool. So I think that sounds good. And then I can add the short circuiting example probably to both of them.
Sure.
So could get in what is currently there. Do I need to share my screen still, or are we just going to say like, cool, yes?
Why don't you share your screen, because then it'll be part of the recording.
Oh, okay, yeah, let's do that. Hold on, let me get the other one. Okay. Where's the button? Okay. So the one on, actually, I should switch these. The one on the left is with the original proposal that has the sort of like recursive-like implementation. And then the one on the right is the iterative chaining one that behaves more like a promise chain or a for loop or something like that. So the one on the left just has the specific document related to the recursive design, and the one on the right has the one related to the iterative design, which is basically here. So the one on the left, I think, does not have too much that really changed. It looks like a lot, but it's mostly coordinating names.
Oh yeah, there was just a lot of general cleanup, like I cleaned up the white space and stuff. So you're seeing a lot of irrelevant diff in here.
Yeah. So the main takeaway is that we've added a short circuit optional flag in the return, which will potentially signal to the loader like stop. And whatever.
Did we mention in this document that the lack of short circuit, that like if like say you have 3 user resolve hooks and then the node default resolve hooks, so 4 potential resolve hooks, if for a particular specifier not all 4 are called, but then you like don't do short circuit, we throw an error because like you screwed up somewhere. Because otherwise it's like, you know, like if we don't throw an error with the lack of short circuit, then it's sort of like, you don't need to include short circuit because it doesn't really do anything. Like including short circuit should turn off us throwing an error that you forgot to include it, you know?
I don't know if I incorporated that into it, but no, that is definitely a thing that we should do. If it's
yeah,
not
that's
in,
just
that I will add
I think
it
we just forgot
immediately
to
after.
put that in, but yeah.
You might want to change the wording a little bit just because it does short circuit normally. It wouldn't change. Like by default, it always short circuits.
Right, but basically you should have to return short circuit true in order to short circuit without
Otherwise,
throwing an error.
just
And
the
the error could
wording-
just say like, if you know, it could be very explicit. Like if you intended to short circuit, make sure you return short circuit true or whatever, you know.
I completely agree. It just says it changes the behavior in this doc.
I think that was probably because he copy pasted it from the other one,
Yeah,
where in the
that's
other one
fine.
it would have changed the behavior.
It would, yes.
Does it say?
Will cause the chain to short circuit.
Well,
Yeah, that's
okay,
how it
yeah,
would
true.
behave in the other one.
True. Yes. Yeah. I guess we should change it to say like will allow the chain to short circuit.
Or just say that like, but you know, because any hook
I mean, allows
because each hook is if any hook fails to call the next hook, that would implicitly short circuit the chain. Because this is often a user error, Node will throw when this occurs unless short circuit true is passed to tell Node that you are intentionally breaking and not allowing the remaining hooks of the chain to be called. Something along those lines, I think.
I think allow is a fine word because even if you set it, they could still always try to call their next loader for whatever reason. They could be preloading, they could be doing like searching, whatever. It would just be that basically stating the operations that they're doing against the next loader are unrelated to the return value.
So the point that we need to specifically add is that Node will throw an error if you short circuit without returning short circuit true.
Yep.
That's the important point to add.
Cool.
Yeah, that's fine.
I will do that immediately after this. Cool. Cool. I think that's about it.
So
I think I do have the general design for the example for short circuiting ready to go. So I think I can include
if you want to add that too, I mean, we can add all that before merging it in if you want. There's no like hurry in merging it in. I was just thinking there's no reason to keep these like as PRs sitting open forever. So whenever you think this current like revision pass is done, let's just merge them in and then we can like open new PRs as needed.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, I think that's about it. Then solicit feedback and see how it goes.
So I tried to go through them both last night, and the thing that stuck out to me was in the one on the right, the iterative one. Can you scroll down a little bit to, I think, what are the loader chains? And then go a little bit further down to the first example. Like I think either the Babel or CoffeeScript one, or maybe it's the HTTPS one. If you want to open them up, yeah, that. So if interim result.source, and then if resolved role starts with, so basically it's like every loader that you write, like, so they each have pros and cons. Like the one on the left, like, yeah, you got to remember to not short circuit, right? Like you could easily forget and accidentally short circuit. And yeah, we're gonna add some kind of catch for that, but there's always that's the risk inherent in that design. In this one, you have to be explicit about, on the one on the right, you have to be explicit about, like, you almost have two inputs. You either get an interim result or you get the original source, the original input. You know what I mean?
No, sorry, could you repeat it?
So like the one on the right,
So just like the one on the left has a problem where you accidentally short circuit, in this you can accidentally clobber interim result dot source.
or forget to use it at all. Like you could write
Yeah,
you could write your hook that just never looks at the interim result argument of the function. It only
Yes.
works with resolved URL. And
Yes.
it's like the exact opposite of forgetting to
Should we?
call next. It's like forgetting to handle interim result, because like if I was developing HTTPS loader, it would be the only loader I'm running. So I might never think to test it with interim result. I might only like look at resolved URL every time, and it would work for me in my development. I could write tests around it, I could ship it. But then as soon as someone tries to chain it, it's unchainable because I didn't think to handle the case of when an interim result is passed in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's the same solution, basically. You just have a flag that, yes, I intended. Otherwise, if the flag's not set, it complains. So like if somebody doesn't read interim result dot source, like make it throw an error by default.
Well, but if
Sure, but
say
that's a
you're
lot harder
mocking
to
or
do. Like,
something,
how would you even do that? Like, put getters and setters on interim
Yeah,
results. I mean,
that's how I would do it, but I'm lazy. You could do it in fancier ways. Getters and setters seem easiest.
Yeah. But like if you're, for instance, using a mocker, you wouldn't read interim result. You would intentionally want to throw it away.
Sure, but there are intentional reasons you want to short circuit. So both are just guarding against common bugs.
Right. Well, what I was thinking with this design was that by putting it first in like putting it as the first argument, it's more difficult to ignore. For instance, you can't just omit it. So when you're writing your function, you would have to see like, oh, there is an interim result. I should probably use that if it's there. And then putting this as a second parameter nested into something. I did that as like you can, like this information is available to you. It's not readily like in your face available. So like probably not the first thing you need.
well, I mean,
it depends. Just because you know there's interim result, there's nothing forcing you to actually do anything more than like return it, maybe. You don't have to check if source exists. You don't have to do anything.
I mean, someone could just as easily write like, if not interim result, then interim result equals default load context. And then they're suddenly using the pattern on the left. You know what I mean? Like that way you always have an interim result.
Yeah, I think it's easier just to add the check if
Okay.
you want to guard against it. Like arguing about what humans are going to do is difficult.
So like we would add a property to the return that says like overridden or something.
Ignored, maybe? Short circuit is not quite right.
I think ignore
Yep.
interim result.
Skip
True.
is a common one when you're talking about AST tools in JavaScript.
Oh,
I wouldn't worry
like
about
that
what we
better.
call it
Name
so
is
much. Like as
not
long as it's, we can always rename it later.
Okay, sure.
But yeah, ignore interim result, what I would name it.
That differs the return API of the hooks though. The recursive one only has the skipped. This wouldn't actually matter when they're sort of settled, but more.
This would only apply to the one on the right, the iterative.
Yeah, exactly. So like
Wouldn't make sense for this one.
currently, the output of these is the same, and then but over now it would change to additionally have an extra one.
I don't think the one on the right would have short circuit.
It wants to
Yes.
have short circuit from what we talked about.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
But the one
So
on the
now
right
that
is much
the
more
iterative
about
one's-
manual. The one on the right,
is getting a lot
everything
more
we
complicated
return.
now.
Well, it is complicated because you're trying to control a for loop essentially. So everything in our return value is going to be all the control structures. So short circuit is like a break. If there was always a catch or throw, if you don't check interim result dot source, then ignore would be like a continue that skips over that throw.
Yeah.
And it's just gonna, you're just adding all the control structures of a for loop. It's whatever. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, that's almost a better way of describing these two proposals. It's like the iterative is like for loop. The recursive is like a function that calls another function that calls another function. You know, so it's what's the word for that? Like
The higher
stacked.
order function.
No,
Technically.
that's a function that returns a function.
No, no. Functions that accept functions as parameters or return them. It's a function that has a data type.
But it's not accepting a function as a parameter. It's always it's accepting the return value of the function as its parameter. It's chained. It's
Yeah, I was
like
gonna say,
it's like if it going back to like old school jQuery, it's chaining, you know, like or D3 or any of those like older libraries, low dash chain. It's that type of
It's not just old stuff, it's the same as the pipeline operator.
Well, or that, sure.
Well,
but I mean,
might
they
be a
both
good way to
implement chaining. One is just doing it through whatever you call it, chaining pipeline. The other is doing it through chaining, you know, for loop or whatever. But yeah, you need a lot more control structures for a for loop than you do for the pipeline, I guess.
The pipeline, all the control structures are written by hand. That's why we have the short circuit thing we added to make sure people actually write the boilerplate to do it properly.
Yeah.
Where on the right side with the for loop, short circuit is not there so that they write the boilerplate properly. It's to give them the capability to stop it.
Yeah. So the other thing sorry, go ahead.
That was it.
Okay. The other thing I noticed between these was that when one hook calls the next hook in the chain, it could pass in any arguments. So it could give the next hook a completely different context if it wants. Whereas
it could, but I think in our actual implementation, wait.
Oh, you're allowed to.
In our actual implementation, I think we would probably not really let that happen. So
why?
Because then you can do all kinds of naughty things.
I mean, what's naughty, I guess?
Like pulling the context out from under them.
What's naughty about that? I'm asking, like,
resolving
a diff against a different parent URL seems perfectly fine. That's a form of aliasing. That's what PNP, Yarn, all those people essentially do. They do it on purpose.
Okay. I hadn't.
You might
considered
want to
slash
say
plan to
swap
do
out a
that.
condition. Like say you wanted a loader that like was a
Forces
browser
the
loader.
condition, yeah.
So like
Mhm.
you want Node to like if the conditions property of the package JSON has a browser field, you want to tell Node to use that one instead of whatever Node would have picked by default, then you
Mhm.
could like rewrite the like, oh, the Node condition now is the value of the browser condition or something, whatever. When
Mhm.
we're going to add import assertions here soon, you could you just call like the default load and pretend to tell it that the import assertion was type JavaScript or something like that in order to like convince it to load the thing that otherwise it would have thrown like unsupported import assertion. Like I feel like there are lots of use cases where you might want to muck with the context, especially when passing it to the default one. Now you can do that with yours because default load is available to each hook, but that just means it can't be chained.
Sorry, what can't be chained?
Like in the
The
iterative one,
chain.
any hook can call default, but first off, there's a possibility that default load gets called multiple times because like you have 3 hooks and all 3 could call default load, which isn't really ideal. But also like that's the only one that can be called with like an altered context.
Well, we talked about this earlier, like 3 meetings ago before I started changing jobs. It's about just adding data and then restarting the loop from the beginning is what you want if you want to do something like the browser hook. Because you don't want to call default load. You want to call your next one with a modified context. So we could change it to like interim context that mutates as it goes along. You could do other things. Yeah.
So
Or
like
you could
we
restart the loop.
just let them modify the context argument, like properties on that, and it's that same context object gets passed along.
On the right-hand side,
Yeah.
modifying it and passing it, it doesn't have to be modify the actual object. It could be like
Return.
context is, if it's set on the return value, it is passed along. But you're doing all the manual data passing on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, you're doing all of it in your code.
Right.
It's just part of the function call to next.
Yeah.
On the left side.
Which is, I guess, the lesser of 2 evils here. I'm not sure what is
I don't.
inappropriate.
I am
Well,
so
it's a
familiar with
lot.
the
It's a lot.
nested. Yeah.
I would find it much more intuitive because it's just a function call. Like I know the arguments of a function, saying that like, oh, if interim result dot context is set to some value, that becomes the context argument of the next hook. Like that's like you'd have to read the documentation to know that that's what's going to happen, which is fine, but I would find it a lot less intuitive. Like I know when I call next and I pass an argument, the next hook is going to get that argument. Like that's what JavaScript is. That's a function call,
Right. Well, I was thinking the mutation of context, the argument of context versus including it in the return. I'm thinking maybe mutating context as the arguments it's passed in. We shouldn't.
I think
that might be
so.
unexpected.
I think so there's 2 issues with that. A lot of people hate mutating, like mutating an object, having that those side effects persist after the function ends will like bother a lot of people, and that will feel like a bug.
Yeah,
but it's faster. So much faster.
But a lot of people really prefer the like immutable style, and they expect that the object passed into the function is just for that function's use, and not that like it's going to persist afterward and Node is going to keep using it or something like that. So I think that like that'll throw a lot of people if we don't behave that way. Like if we treat the context object as not throwaway, like we actually keep persisting it afterward. So I wouldn't go down that road if I were you, because I think that'll confuse a lot of people. So if you're
Okay,
gonna
cool.
do it, then you just have to, it just has to be part of the return object for the hook on the iterative version.
Okay, cool. Wait, sorry.
And then you add iterative result.context. I mean, it's not that different from how we currently have the format hint from resolve. Like if format is returned by the chain of resolve hooks, that becomes the context.format input to load. You know, in the PR about import assertions, I'm doing the same for the import assertions object, because like resolve now has context.import assertions in addition to parent URL and conditions. And so if resolve returns import assertions, it's treated as a hint, just like format, to go into
okay, cool.
the context of load. So that's another case where like, yeah, you might want to return that to affect how load behaves, like returning it from resolve, but also within the chain of either resolve or load, you might want to muck with that to influence the behavior of later hooks.
Okay, cool. Sounds good to me. I'm also in the immutable argument camp, by the way, so I'm on board for that.
Staunchly in the perf camp.
I mean, yes, it's more performant, but also like there are surely other ways to get that performance. And
There is 100% not. Go talk to JavaScript VM devs. You're never going to get that speed. Records and tuples are significantly slower than objects. Immutability brings slowness. That's what
Anyway,
they all say.
well,
we don't,
for sure, yes.
I think
I'd
for
rather not make a
hooks,
bug.
it's not like we're talking about an object with like two properties that are very small. I think and hooks are not meant to be high performance. So I think like,
yeah, it doesn't matter for this.
It's a lot safer in
doesn't
terms
matter.
of like potential bugs if we don't surprise
These
people.
are going to be
with,
IO bound. They're not going to be compute bound.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I think that's like, look, Jacob, you're implementing this, so I feel like you should have the final say, since we don't seem to get anyone else to give any input. I was hoping that like maybe the APM folks or some of the people who are like kind of more loosely part of our group
I am now
could,
employed by APM folks.
well, do you have
so
an
now
opinion?
you can speak for them.
What would you pick, Bradley?
Bradley is now the Lorax. You speak for the trees.
How would I speak? I'm biased. I know they've already done implementations on Express Connect and the workflow on the left. So they're going to choose that just so they have less work to do. It doesn't even matter.
That's not to say that that's an unreasonable choice.
No.
Yeah.
The only thing that I think they're gonna want is whenever loaders actually occur, they don't want to pass in the CLI flag. And neither of these really change.
Yes.
We need to address that somehow, some other way.
Oh my God, I was talking to someone a couple of days ago. I think that, yeah, and they were like, "No, this is awful. I need something with not the CLI flags." I'm like, wow.
So you can restart the main thread. That's the easiest PR we could do. Restart the main thread with the new set of command line arguments. That's it. That's a good, easy solution.
Although, in order for code to be allowed to do that, we should have to require a flag that like enables that behavior.
The one, I don't think they need to do that.
That was a joke.
No, that's probably the
Very
easiest
dirty
way.
joke,
It's a
sorry.
perf hit for sure. Definitely, but people just don't like mucking with the command line flags. And you need it to happen before your entry point gets loaded because the SM resolves before the entry point evaluates.
Well, there's a lot of complexity with actually building that because it's like, would you want some random npm dependency to be able to do that?
Yes,
What would be the consequences?
I am perfectly fine with a random npm being allowed to do it as long as I can delete that method or have a flag to disable it. Because then they can start up the next time with that flag disabled.
Anyway, but let's deal with that. I don't know. There's
Yeah.
all right.
So that's all
So
that they really care about.
Mhm.
Like, they don't want that CLI flag.
so I kind of feel like, so if we add the kind of the missing pieces to the one on the right, so that it has like then it has the same functionality as the one on the left. Like they could both achieve all the same things. Then it just becomes a matter of kind of preference of, do you want this to look more like a for loop or more like a jQuery chain, pipeline chain,
Yep.
or
I think
express
it's
middleware
a
chain or
lot of
whatever.
data to add on the right because you're basically re-implementing control structures in your return values.
Yeah, it is growing quite a bit.
It's going to continue to grow. The more use cases you talk about, the more control structures you can't leave up to the implementer of the hook. You have to actually create it for them.
Okay. Well, I'm
At the
just
same
thinking
time,
of.
the workflows are very explicit, like what you do support.
Mhm.
I'm more familiar with the one on the left. I'm never going to have a clear, unbiased opinion. So I'm not.
And I wrote the one on the left, so I'm hardly unbiased either. That's kind of why I was saying, like, I don't want to, like, I feel like I shouldn't make this decision. I'm okay with Jacob making this decision because he's gonna code it.
Well,
It would be nice if we had some more, like, less biased people to weigh in on this, but
the one thing I do have concerns with is if we stop passing in next as an argument, if we actually give them like the full loader access and what that means on the right. So
What?
a load hook could call resolve, it could call get preload code or whatever.
a load
Sure.
hook could call. So like
You
within
could
the
call
resolve
the
hook, you could
next
call
one in
like
the
this
chain.
dot load or something.
It will be effectively like super, calling super.
Why? That sounds like chaos.
Well, because like you might want to start loading stuff from your resolve hook. Or when you're done loading stuff, you see, oh, I've got relative URLs in this. I should resolve them.
I think though that would screw up chaining, because like if you do all of loading within a resolve hook, then
They're always
short circuited the
isolated.
entire chain that could have happened in a chain of load hooks.
Well, it never goes back to the original context, at least on the left. So it never destroys the actual delegation. And I don't know how that works on the right. If you call a different hook from the loop you're in.
I mean, I don't think either proposal has that right now, and I almost
Yeah, I
feel like, why
hadn't
don't we
considered
implement
that.
chaining first without that, and then potentially add that later if we find a use case
My
for it?
concern is I don't see how it works on the right.
I was gonna say, yeah, like if I don't think that's something we could push aside, because I think that's a I don't know, deal breaker for the one on the right. I have no idea how you could accomplish that.
You could do it, but it would always be, it's kind of like the default load. You always go to the top. You can never, and then you have the short circuiting problem.
Well, wouldn't we just basically replace the default load param with like a parameter called hooks, and it's like an array of the functions that are in the chain?
Jan tried that a few years ago. It was a bad idea. Because now you're actually tracking which hook you are, and you're calling the other ones manually.
Well, it's similar to like array prototype for each, where like the first argument is the element, but then the other two arguments are like the index and the full array of all the elements. So that would be
Well,
kind of
the
like we're passing
current
all that in.
index, it's not always the same array. It changes over time on the last argument. So yeah, it's complicated. For loops are complicated.
I thought
No,
the loops were easier. Well, unless you're like trying to do recursion.
So the big thing for that is the ability for loaders to actually communicate with each other without being inside of a hook. So like if you've got some loader that did some work, like TS Node has this big problem where they want to share their TypeScript byte cache across multiple phases.
Mhm.
And so they need to send it basically arbitrary extra data, and they can't just synchronize when they want it. They have to send it during a load hook or something of that nature. So, yep.
Is this affected by potentially moving things to threads? Because then they can't share.
It's affected
like literal
in general. They're only sharing like bytecode references. They're not actually doing copy ops. So if they were to share a shared array buffer, it would have no effect if it's threaded, not threaded.
Ah, okay.
It's mostly to avoid doing work.
Wait, isn't shared array buffer currently disabled or something because of meltdown or kidney bean or heart something? Oh, okay.
In the browser, atomics.wait is still disabled on the main thread, but I think the rest is all unflagged again.
Oh, okay.
Safari was the Safari or Firefox, I forget, one or the other recently unflagged it again. But the other two have been shipping it unflagged for over a year.
Oh, okay. Ooh, I'm behind the times.
You want to hear alphabet soup, go read up on what they did to make it get around meltdown.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, one thing I'm thinking is, so if we're, I don't know if you know, Jacob, you've already made up your mind or something, but like I think if maybe one way forward, if we could just make a decision now, but like if we don't want to, another way forward could be we finish cleaning up these documents, we merge in the PRs, and then show just now we'll have just like straight up links to each kind of fully written out design doc. We could share. I could just open another issue on the Loaders repo, tag all those other people, like that guy who's the maintainer of TS Node, for example, the guy who's the maintainer of Yarn PMP, and be like, okay, if you were going to write TS Node as a loader, like which of these would, you know, work for you? Which of these would be easier for you? You know, and it kind of use that feedback to, like, if you were going to write it as one of the examples like we have here for HTTPS loader, et cetera, like, you know, assume we've also done the work of giving you lots of utility functions, because that's like independent of either of these. What would your preference be, you know? And then we can kind of see what their feedback is. Maybe even if we've decided now, or if we think we've decided now, that might still be a worthwhile exercise to do as like a check on us.
Cool. So yeah, I was going to say that I think actually I am sort of leaning a little bit left because my main concern was, and the impetus for creating the iterative design was the short circuit and users accidentally doing things that they did not intend to do. But with these extra checks that we've sort of talked about now, and being able to pass along the various bits, I think that mostly addresses the concerns. The only thing is just the like wrapping your head around how this works. I still have a little bit of trouble with, but that could just be me.
I mean, that's a real, I've been struggling with that too. Like, I feel like recursive isn't the best name for it. I mean, like if you could scroll up to the example, it's right there. So we're like Babel, where I'm like putting like a function inside another function.
Mhm.
That was, I thought, like the easiest way to explain it. I mean, does that, if that doesn't make it much easier, then I wonder if like
We
like
could change this to be using actual super.
I don't know, that would make it any easier. I mean, like, what would it be? How would we change it to that? The thing is, you're never going to be calling them outside yourself. Like you're never gonna write it like jQuery style, where it's like Babel parentheses input close parentheses dot CoffeeScript parentheses input parentheses dot HTTPS.
Right.
Input parentheses, you know, like, because that's what Node does. Like Node is the orchestrator of running them in sequence. So that part doesn't need to be easy or easily comprehensible by people.
Mm-hmm.
It's only if you were to write one of those hooks within the contents of the function that's getting chained, you know, what makes this most sense for you?
Are you asking, or are you saying?
Well, I'm just saying, like, I don't know
question.
what's the easier way to. I mean, I don't know. Also, if I were to put super in here, like my instinct as a user would be, I would assume that super would always refer to the default, like default load or default resolve, you know, because like I would think of like my hook is you know, my resolve extends default resolve type of thing, and so super would be like
I
the
meant
default version.
Like each of these would become a method on a class. So you export default class, Babel loader extends nest abstract nested loader, or whatever we want to call it. That's a gnarly, terrible name. And then when it's constructed, I mean, it'll get whatever hooks to the next nested one.
I mean, that's not really any different than what we have. Like,
Nah,
that's just putting a class wrapper around exporting two functions.
But yeah, if super makes it more intuitive, that's really what we're getting at. If super doesn't make it more intuitive, I mean, we shouldn't do that.
I think super would be more intuitive if this like abstract class that we're extending thing was something known that you knew what super meant, then super would help. But if it's like yet another thing that's completely new to people, then it's like, well, what is super exactly? You know what I mean?
Like when you were first proposing it, I was thinking super was some kind of protected reference to ESM loader. And I was like, oh my God.
No, just like a object-oriented aesthetic sugar.
I mean, I do like that, but I think in this particular case, that might cause more confusion.
It might, but I'm just grabbing in the dark.
Should we?
No, I mean, it's good
create
to,
a third
explore
design?
these other ideas, because I don't like, I feel like this is a valid question, but like I feel like we're going to get more and more. I feel like every version of this is going to be confusing. So it's sort of a question of like, what's the least confusing one? And also a corollary to that is like, what's the best way to explain it to try to avoid as much confusion as possible up front. Because like you said, like if I had thought to include short circuit in the original version, because like I feel like a lot of people are going to react like Jacob did, that like, oh, this design sucks, it's too confusing, let me do something else, let me propose an alternative, and they're going to start, you know, they're going to run into the buzzsaw of like, well, how do you handle X, Y, and Z, and alpha, beta, and gamma, and delta, you know, et cetera. So
Do we think that it's worthwhile to write up a third one that uses this class
I
wrapper and
can do
super thing?
that. I can do that.
Pardon? Okay.
No, that's not actually that big of an effort to do.
Okay. And I haven't thought through
I mean,
this at all.
alternatively, like if we're getting, I'm just worrying about like, we don't have too much attention span of the people we'd be asking to review this. Like we could just kind of get if we're leaning towards the recursive one, we could just kind of get that document in you know, final shape, like clean it up as much as we, let's get both of these at least cleaned up and merged in. But we could then maybe just ask everyone, we're leaning towards the recursive one. Can you please review it and let us know your feedback? And then based on that feedback, we might say, oh, okay, well, why don't you take a look at this iterative one? Or Bradley writes the third one. We ask them to take a look at that. Like, rather than giving them 3 things to review and evaluate, which is a lot of work for people to try to, you know, evaluate 3 options and weigh pros and cons, et cetera. We could just tell them like, this is what we're leaning on. What do you think? And then only give them the other alternatives if the feedback seems to warrant it.
Okay. Yeah, I think that works.
Okay, I have a hard stop, so.
All right.
Okay, cool.
But sounds
Oh,
good.
wait, if we have 1 minute left. You were saying something about fixing that bug. Where the heck is this? That should be fixable if someone has time.
Yeah, so exit code 13 just means top level await didn't finish by the time everything closed out.
Mhm.
And like, we just need to, I forget the exact incantation, add a wrapper around the top level import that's causing this.
I was okay. I have something else about that, but
There's a different one that's similar looking to this that's actually a problem, but
before I lose you, Bradley, something is that I've been while I've been working on the PR that I've been working on, something I've been noticing is that like the ESM loader seems to do a lot of creating of promises and putting those promises in a cache without awaiting them, and it's like not clear when they ever get awaited or resolved. Or what happens when they get resolved. I feel like I would love like if you, I don't know who wrote that, if that's you or if it's Guy or Gus or somebody.
It's me, Guy, and Gus, where we used to await stuff too much and then it got really slow. And then we started shoving promises into maps instead. And we only await it when we need the result.
Okay.
So it's an optimization that made it hideous.
I just find it hard to follow. Like I would love a detailed explanation of like just an explanation of what this pattern is and why we're doing it, and like how I'm supposed to follow it to not break it in the future or something. Because I feel like my instinct is like, well, whenever there's a promise, I should await it, but that's not happening all the way.
Opposite of what's going on.
Yeah, so it's just very confusing for me to follow this. Like we're passing these possibly fulfilled promises around all over the place. So
yep. Okay, we can set up a meeting. I'll need to make slides for that. That's easy.
Okay.
Maybe in a week or 2. Just throw something on the calendar and we'll see how it sticks.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking.
I gotta go. I have like a higher up.
All right. Go for it.
Bye, Bradley. Good luck.
Yeah, the other thing I was thinking was trying to break up that ESM loader file into more, just take chunks of it and put it into other files, just so it's kind of easier to manage. Which is a little tricky because it's a class, but
yeah, I was just gonna say ESM loader, the class.
Yeah.
Is it that big?
Like I made, if you look at, yeah, I mean, it's not that huge, but because they're dense lines, like to your point about that it could have more comments, absolutely.
Oh, do you mean the result?
Well, just that whole file, like the ESM loader file. You added a lot of great comments and type definitions, I noticed, so that's been good. But yeah,
like in Guy's pull request that just happened that we were commenting on, that was in Resolve, not in ESM Loader.
Oh, Resolve's also
Which
pretty
is-
huge.
Yeah, it's enormous.
Both of them could be split into many files. But yeah, if you look at the PR that I was working on, that Antoine started, I moved the like, it starts with a 4.0 something or other. It's a draft, so it might not show up as open. Just put like import assertions. It's by Antoine.
Oh, I thought you started it. Oh,
No, he started it, and I took over well, he's actually still working. We're both putting commits on the same branch, so we're kind of doing it together. ADU, yeah. That one, yeah,
that it?
40250.
Unflag?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you were telling me
He means unflagged,
number.
like he means unflagged like Harmony import assertions from V8.
Right. Okay.
Not to because there is no like node CLI flag related to import assertions. But yeah, if you look in here, I added a file called like assert.js, where everything related to validating the import assertions happens over here. I feel like there are other parts of the ESM loader that could be kind of split out into files like this. That's all I was looking at. That's just like a code organization thing that we might want to do as like a follow-up PR.
Oh yeah, sure. I'm all for stuff like this. I remember
it does kind of screw up Git history a little bit, but these files don't have that long of a history, so I kind of feel like now's the time to try to break them apart into as small as, because they're only going to grow. Like assert.js is 50 lines now, but once they add support for other types of assertions besides type, like this file is just going to grow and grow and grow, and like things like that. Like Resolve is, I don't know how long it is now, but like the more we can split chunks out into small files like that.
Yeah, absolutely on board. The reason I didn't do it in mine was because my pull request was already significantly bigger.
Oh yeah, I mean, we should do that as its own PR. So it's like there's a commit on master just doing that, so that if you're trying to trace the history of these files, it's like it's not just that like 100 lines got deleted here and added over here. And you don't want to do that and have changes within those 100 lines on the same commit, you know? So.
Okay, cool. Anyway. Yeah, I'm down for that. If you want, I can rough out some stuff, like a list of stuff that I think might be a good candidate to do that.
I mean, it's not a high priority, but yeah, whenever you want to do it. I mean, I want to land this first. That's what I'm working on.
Sure. We
can land this first, do that, and then do chaining or whatever. I mean, it doesn't matter. The order kind of more like whatever you want to land in what order.
Okay, cool. Well, let's see. I'll put together the list first to see how much stuff we've got, because then I'm thinking it could potentially make, if we actually do the splitting apart of stuff, it could potentially make the chaining implementation easier, or maybe harder. I don't know. But we could see.
What it would really make easier is that other issue about utility functions.
Yeah.
Because like splitting getting a method of ES loader, splitting it out to be a freestanding function that just, you know, didn't have any references to this, but just took as function arguments, like took as input everything it needed and then spit out as output. That's kind of what we need to do to make the utility functions, because then that becomes a function that we can export off of module, which is what they need for that. So kind of declassifying ESM loader might ultimately be a good thing in general. So
purifying.
Yeah,
literally making them pure functions.
Yeah, exactly. I guess so. Yeah, I don't know. I've been doing JavaScript for so long that's like I almost feel like I don't know what object-oriented programming is anymore. I don't know. But yeah, something along those lines. So.
Cool. Sounds good.
All right. Well, cool. Thank you. Yeah. So let me know if you're gonna, are you gonna do the next pass on the design? I feel like we should finish the design docs first and get those merged in.
Yeah.
So
I'll do
I did a
that
pass last
cleanup.
night. Why don't you do your whatever passes you're gonna do and then just give me a ping and I could do whatever final pass about short circuit or anything else to add, and then we can merge them in. Does that
Well, I
sound
was
good?
thinking I can do this cleanup stuff that we've got here in like the next hour or something.
Oh yeah,
And
okay.
then I don't think there's really anything to look with that. And then I can do the whatchamacallit, the examples like later tonight or tomorrow or something, and then there's less urgency.
Yeah, I mean that's
And
a
then we
lot
can like
faster than I'll get to it. So yeah, if you want to do that and just give me a ping when you're done, I'll
cool.
just read it and then hopefully we can just merge it in.
Cool.
And yeah, maybe we can ping the rest of the group that like, yeah, we think this is done. Any notes before? I mean, I don't think the notes are that important for a design doc. Like if they have notes, we just open a new PR to address them. So
Cool.
yeah, we just merge them in.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Do
See you
it.
around.
Bye.
Take it easy.